Hello, UK Crime Book Club. We are going to apologise in advance if you can hear the work going on next door to Daniel's house. But at the moment, it seems to have gone quiet, so fingers crossed, guys.
Yeah.
Go on, introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Daniel. I write under the pen name Morgan Greene, and I'm the author of the Jamie Johansson series. And yeah, I'm back. I did an interview way back last year, I think, in kind of March or April. And yeah, it's great to be back. So hello everybody.
You just can't escape us, can you? We keep pulling you back in.
Well, I'm always happy to return.
And we're always happy to have you. So tell us what you've been up to. You've had a busy week.
Yeah. Well, we've just moved house. So we moved into, we left the UK back in November and we flew to British Columbia in Canada, which is where I am now. And yeah, we were living in a place for about 6 months, but it's been all go, and we just moved into a new place now. And yeah, it's been pretty hectic, and mix that up with kind of having a pretty nasty case of COVID 2 weeks ago, and yeah, it's all go here, and there's also dodging bears and wolves and all the other kind of things that.
Which is the first thing that I asked you. Never mind the books. How are the wolves? How is that situation?
We haven't seen any yet, and I don't really know if I want to be honest. I'm pretty happy just kind of seeing them on thing. I was trying to recall any time I'd ever seen anything that involved a wolf that wasn't about it eating people or killing things, and I just could not recall one. So I mean, I'm happy if they just stay out in the woods and that's fine by me.
Absolutely. So, we've already got a few questions. I'm just getting them all as Facebook user on there. I've no idea why. Got it up on my phone and I can see everyone's names. So we're good. So if you see me looking down, I apologise. It's just to see who it is. So we see.
That's my dog. Hey, yeah. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We love it when the pets get involved.
Yeah, well, he's very loud, and there's not a lot of furniture in here.
He's hearing a strange woman's voice in his new house. It's unusual.
Yeah.
I put people off at the best of times. Don't worry.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just going to open this door real quick, because I don't think there's nobody there. Just, ain't nobody there. Come on, let's go. Back inside. Come on. I'll just leave the door open, and he'll just skulk around out there.
Make his own mind up then.
So, yeah, I think it's because he can hear people outside. So I'm really sorry about that, guys. It's not exactly the most
professional. It is fine.
But,
at least with our worries. Just be glad we've got internet. Why did I just jinx us? Let's move on quick.
Yeah, don't.
Why would I say that?
That's all good.
Kaz says hello to us. And she's asking how is living in Canada going?
Yeah, it's good. The kind of main difference is everything's a lot further away. That's what we're kind of very realizing, is that when we lived back home, it was a case of sort of being able to get to our local shop and pub and things in 2 minutes, and then a local town in 5 minutes, the local city in 20 minutes, and the capital city in 40 minutes. And it was kind of, you take that for granted, and you come to Canada, and it's kind of very much like, oh, do you want to go to the cinema? The nearest cinema is 45 minutes away, and that's the next town over. So it's like, okay. So it's very sort of common here that if you kind of just want to like pop to a certain store, that actually that's like a 4-hour expedition, So it's
like pretty... going to IKEA over here. It's it's quite a distance, and it's a big undertaking. It's careful planning.
It's a mission. Anytime you want to go anywhere, it's just a mission. Yeah, but yeah, it's fun, and the roads are really nice and wide, so you kind of just drive around, and everything's a bit slower, and because everything's so far away and everything takes so long, nobody's ever in a rush, because you can't rush to do a 4-hour round trip, So it's just a case of everybody relaxes and takes their time, and you just kind of get to meander around the roads and take in all the natural majesty of the place, and the mountains and the lakes, and all that kind of stuff. So
I doubt you could ever get bored of that. It sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's we see a lot of deer as well. That's the nice thing, is like people can tell we're not from Canada because every time we see a deer, we're like, oh my God, there's a deer. And people are like, yeah, they're literally everywhere. And we're like, I know, but look at it, it's a deer. And they're like, yeah, I know, they're like really annoying. They like run into cars and they eat my vegetables and all sorts of stuff. And we're like, but it's like a real deer.
Yeah, right there.
And people are like, you're not from here, huh? And we're like, no, we're not.
The Welsh accent might give it away, though.
Yeah, slightly. I have started like affecting words though in order to kind of be better understood. Like when people ask me what I do, I tell them I'm a copywriter. They don't really understand because the intonation is different. They're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I'm a copywriter." And they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, I know what that is." So it's like it's such a weird thing.
Rather than it creeping in accidentally and naturally, you're having to kind of get on with it, speed it up a bit.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, so where's the supermarket? And they're like, the what? And you're like, oh, the grocery store. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just down there. And you're like, okay, thanks. You know, but it's like, yeah, it's like, you've got like they just seem to kind of not really understand certain things. You're like, when's rubbish day? And they're like, what? And you're like, oh, garbage day. No, Thursday. Yeah.
Just do what everybody else does. Look out the window in the morning. Wait for that one person that puts the right bin out.
Yeah, it's
every street has to have a proper grown-up who knows when bin day is. It's not me.
Oh, it's like a whole thing here where like you're not allowed to put them out the night before or anything. You got to put them out and then like bring them in quickly.
Very good reasons for that.
Yeah, well, it attracts bears mainly, you know.
So yeah, not a good idea to attract the bears to your house overnight.
It's you can get fined actually. Like they're really like funny about it if you're seen feeding the bears or leaving food out unintentionally or anything like that. You can get a pretty hefty fine. So it's
yeah. So, yeah. I would imagine the fear of the bear would be enough to make people not do it.
Yeah, I mean like the brown bears are the big nasty ones, and they don't generally come down to town. They don't really like people and noise and that kind of thing. They prefer. The black bears are very kind of precocious, and they don't really mind people. So they're not really super dangerous. Like the rate of kind of like getting attacked or anything is like super low. Like the only time they ever kind of cause an issue is if they get like startled or cornered. But like people quite often will put out bear feeders or they like throw out apples or that kind of thing because they think bears are cool, and if like a bear comes into their backyard, they're like, oh, it's a bear, and that's great. But then the issue is that like people's cats and dogs and stuff disappear, and it's like
See, no, I did not know. Excuse me, that a bear feeder was a thing. Now a bird feeder, squirrel feeder. I'm like squirrels about. Like you are about bears. Squirrel, I'm like a puppy. See a squirrel, I get really excited. But feeding a bear doesn't sound like the smartest thing you could do.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's North America. The schooling system's a little bit notorious here, It's, but,
and on that note, I'm going to move us on.
Yeah, okay.
We had Donna said a very good evening to you, Sam and Dan. Hello, hope you're feeling better. It's like tag team with COVID. You got it, and then I've got it, and then Donna got it after me, and
everybody's got it. Yeah,
that's what happens when you remove restrictions. But again, I'll move myself on this time because there's a rant we don't need. Everyone knows.
Rabbit hole that is, I think.
Kaz has asked, who is your favourite Scandi author? Hers is Anne Holt for crime and Tove Jansson for fiction. Have I got that right? I am notoriously bad at pronouncing names and places, which was something I really loved in your books that you explained it. But we'll ask you this and then I'll ask you that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to be the classic answer, but I'm a pretty big Joe Nesbo fan. I don't tend to read super kind of heavily. I know that a lot of people are kind of knocking off hundreds of books a year, and I'll read kind of quite slowly, and I really kind of like to immerse myself in a book. So I really enjoy the way Nesbo sort of just really slowly plots things out and has that really kind of like slow Scandi kind of burn style, which is which was a heavy inspiration for Angel Maker. And yeah, I just find it's one of those books that you can't rush, and I think that's where like Scandi fiction falls down for a lot of people as well, as they come from like British crime fiction or American crime fiction, and they get to a Scandinavian crime book, and then after kind of 10 or 15 chapters, you're like, he's just sitting in the car drinking coffee. What the hell's going on? You know, but it's like if you're in a rush, you know, they're not the books for you, I don't think. But you know, it's really nice to be able to kind of really relax and sit into a book and enjoy it for its kind of length. And I think in a way, I think J.K. Rowling actually with her like Galbraith series and things, Cormoran Strike books, I think she's really kind of brought that element of like slow burn, kind of deep Scandi kind of influence to British crime fiction in a way. And you know, there are authors like Maria Adolphson and Will Dean and things who are as well kind of bridging that gap between kind of Scandi and British fiction. And you know, that's what I'm trying to do as well, is kind of use those kind of brooding, dark, kind of slow burning Scandi kind of themes and plot points and sort of beats of the story, but then kind of injecting it with a little bit more of that kind of more tightly wound kind of British crime fiction feel. So yeah, I mean, I take a lot from you know, from Joe Nesbo, and a lot of inspiration from his kind of very precise kind of like not acquiescing to the reader's want for the story to go faster. You know, he's like, this is what happens, and you know, so that's you know, my favorite kind of Scandi author, just to be totally unoriginal.
Yeah. Donna has said, so freaking tired, but generally better. So good. Glad to hear it. The tiredness, I had to duck out on you all of a sudden at the end of our chat after the promo the other day because I could not stay awake. It's the strangest thing. So I just kind of disappeared, and then I felt rude all week that I'd just kind of cut and run very quickly. So I'm hoping I didn't.
As well, it was horrible. Yeah, two nights on the boat, I had to go to bed at just like 7, 8 o'clock because I just couldn't stay awake. So it's yeah, rough.
I know the feeling. Patsy Forsyth says hi. Susan Burns says hi. Donna's saying, was thinking quiet road, snow washing, etc. This sounds good then. The bears, always the bears. So you might set some books in different settings in the future.
Yeah, so I actually just finished writing a book set here in a North American town in the what they call the PNW, the Pacific Northwest, which is very much characterized by these kind of big sweeping valleys and kind of just very, very dense kind of natural old pine forest, and you know, just these big rushing rivers, and just a lot of these little kind of towns that are just kind of logging towns and ex-logging towns where they just came to a valley, set up a big mill, in the same way that like mining towns sprung up in different places in the UK, you know, where they build a mine and build a town around it, and then once they kind of logged everything, the mill kind of shut down, and then this town was sort of left over, and it's got this very sort of kind of industrial kind of influence, and Nelson's very much like that, and it's a very, they kind of tend to be quite isolated towns, you know, and everything you need is kind of inside this little thing. So they're almost like a little microcosm. And I read Chris Whittaker's We Begin at the End, and I spent a relative, a few months down in Southern California and in Northern California, where that's supposed to be set. And I really liked the way that he kind of captured that sense of place and really used a kind of sense of place to underpin a story, you know, and that's something I've always loved about a lot of British crime fiction, is that it relies very heavily on where it is and a big sense of place. And I always try to do that with the kind of the Swedish stuff, and to the best of my ability, use the sort of information I had and the kind of the contacts I had who were kind of on location there to give me a sense of authenticity. But it was really, really rewarding to be able to look out the window here and go for a walk here and be able to describe them as I'm kind of physically looking at them and physically experiencing them, and you know, and just pepper in those little details to really make it feel as kind of, you know, real and authentic as I could. So yeah, I mean, as much as I love writing in kind of Scandinavia, I think that definitely for me it's a case of if I feel that I can transport the reader somewhere and put them in, the middle of a really good story, and I can set that somewhere interesting, I'll definitely kind of, go towards that rather than trying to pen myself in a box and saying, I like to write Scandi, therefore I'm never going to write anything else.
Yeah. So, well, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, which was the you just some of the details, the pronunciation that you popped in there. I found that really helpful. It was done very subtly. It was really, really welcome, because I am terrible. I will see something and just be stuck on the pronunciation. I can spell things brilliantly, but you asked me to say something on camera and they'll all be giggling because they all know my pronunciation of words that are unfamiliar to me is terrible. In one way, that's not such a bad thing. It means I've learned the words by reading them, which is always good. But yeah, I can practically hear Kaz and Donna having a chuckle at me now, and Leslie, because they know my pronunciation is terrible. So as a reader, I really appreciated that.
Good. I'm glad it's Swedish is a kind of a tricky language, and in Angel Maker, I definitely kind of pepped in a lot more kind of Swedish and things. And I'm always very aware as well of kind of trying to choose names for places and names for characters that feel kind of really authentic and feel Swedish, but aren't difficult to say or to remember. And it's always a case of trying to select names that don't sound alike, because that's the thing, is that in the top kind of 20 most common names in Sweden, you have like Johansson, Jonasson, Janssen, like Jonberg, like there's loads of J's. It's a very common thing. So it's a case of trying to find names that are very distinct and trying to come up with names of like places and make up Swedish names that have kind of a Swedish affectation but aren't difficult to pinpoint in the kind of the British mind, I guess, and the same with when I'm trying to pepper in Swedish kind of words and sentences and phrases. I'm always trying to use short, succinct ones that aren't really difficult to say. It's just, nobody. I don't want readers to get bogged down trying to read a sentence, like 10 times that they're not going to understand anyway. So I just, it's just trying to add in enough to make it kind of authentic, I guess, but not too much to bog readers down. So.
Well, I think you do that really well, and I really enjoyed it. Just I wouldn't have had a clue what it said, but then obviously you have put the English translation in there, but not in a clunky way, just in a very natural, flowing way, which is always, it must be a very difficult thing to do, but it is done effortlessly.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's kind of a use of what they call free and direct sort of speech, where you as the narrator kind of mimic the speech pattern of the character and that kind of thing. So it's a way to kind of really be able to get into the character's head as well without having to write from their point of view specifically. So it's I mean, it's all just kind of like smoke and mirrors,
but done so well. You are the Houdini of putting other languages in. That sounded much better in my head than it came out, but it is a compliment.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
We've got hello from Daniel McBreakneck. Hello.
Hey guys.
And somebody has said you've got a good balance with the names and language. Again, I'm refreshing my phone to have a look who that's from. That's from Leslie Lloyd.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Leslie. Yeah, well, I mean, Leslie has been one of my faithful advanced readers for a while, and she's always held me to account with the names where I've kind of put them in, and she's come back and she's like, I don't like this name, it's hard to say, it's hard to remember, change that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, like that kind of stuff is just so valuable, because there's nothing worse than if you're trying to kind of create a memorable character and somebody can't remember their name or pronounce their name, so it's,
I'm a huge fan of Leslie and Leslie's honesty and how spot on she is.
Oh yeah, very.
We've had some conversations that have had me roaring with laughter when she's read something that I've written. So we're not. It's not about anybody else, but how I've thought it and how she's interpreted it, and she's always right.
Yeah, so, and it's that thing of nobody's opinion or nobody's kind of thoughts on something is kind of ever, invalid, even if you don't agree with it or they don't kind of get what you wanted to kind of convey from something. the fact that they're thinking something else, or the fact they're taking something else from it, probably means that, like, you can revisit that with that objectivity of, okay, I thought that I was going for this, but how else could that be construed? And even if you don't end up changing it, there's always opportunity to tighten up and to kind of really kind of eliminate the kind of the ability for misinterpretation and things, which I think is a key part of layering a good kind of whodunit or a good kind of crime thing, because you want to be able to misdirect in the way that you want to misdirect, rather than just kind of blasting people with random facts and letting them confuse themselves. It's a weird sort of thing, but yeah.
You have got a really good team of people around you, people who read your books, give you feedback, spread the word. You're very lucky. So tell everybody what your process is after you finish the, is it the first draft, or is it once the book's ready to go? What are your stages?
So I tend to come up with just a very broad kind of outline and concept for the story first, and then kind of just hammer out a rough plot. And then I tend to kind of plot the first few scenes or first few chapters very tightly right to that, and then kind of reassess where I'm going from there, and then plot the next few, just because very often I'll find that my good idea is not able to be pulled off, or it's not really quite as good by the time I get to it, or that, a new idea presents itself, or I'll just be kind of structuring a conversation that I planned between two characters, and it just doesn't really end up kind of being able to, convey the information that I wanted and have it feel natural. So very often I'm kind of having to just rejig and reshape and kind of do things on the fly. So after I've kind of gone through it all once, I'll tend to go back and do a full kind of back to front edit on it and kind of proof it to the best of my abilities, which are nothing to shout about, as all of my advanced readers and my
nobody can ever proofread their own stuff.
No, they can't.
I'm sure there are these obscene humans who can. It's
I don't
very
trust
rare.
anyone who proofread their own books.
Don't proofread your own stuff. Apparently, Frederick Forsyth wrote Day of the Jackal, and the editor gave him no notes.
Yeah, really? What?
I know. I'll have to ask Tony Kemp more about this, because he was the person who shared that the other day after he met him. But so you've done your it's gone to your advanced readers after your proofread.
So I do my proofread first, and then I tend to send it over to. Sorry, I'm so sorry about this. I tend to send it over to my proofer then to kind of go through it, and she's very astute and she's very erudite as well. She doesn't. Oh my goodness! Be quiet.
Time to come and say hello.
I can go and pick him up if you want to. He's be like,
yes, please. Very, very much. Yes, please.
Come here. Come on. No, he's shy. He's not shy. He's just weird. Yeah, but he actually, my dog's actually named after Jaden's father. So really weird. So his name is Yogi, and I stole that name from somebody I worked with. Her grandfather was named Jorgen, which is Jaden's father's name, and they called him Grandpa Yogi. So I stole that from my dog's name.
That is adorable.
So yeah, which is terrible because nobody can ever pronounce it or understand it. So they say, "Oh, what's your dog's name? He's really pretty." We go, "Oh, his name's Yogi," and they go, "What?" And you're like, "Yogi, Jurgi," and they look at us then like we are mad, and we're like, "Yeah, I know. It's sorry." So it was just hilarious. But anyway, it's a little tangent.
So you were talking about gone to your proofreader.
Yep, and she comes back and she pokes holes in everything and tells me that I need to clear up all these plot points that I kind of. There he is.
Hello, Yogi.
Hi.
Hi. You're gonna bark at me now, aren't you? Hello. Yeah. More of a growl than a bark. That's not bad.
So so she comes back and she gives me lots of notes and lots of kind of corrections and things, and then I go through and make all the corrections and all the changes. Yeah, and then it goes out to my advanced readers.
It's all right. Yogi's fine. Keep going.
And sometimes I'm gonna lock it up there. Come in there, quick, come here. Yogi. Here you go. Right. Sorry.
You are going to regret closing that door. Stop apologising. It's fine.
I regret getting the dog, to be honest. But, no, yeah, I mean, often I will as well during the writing process send the manuscript to beta readers as well, and kind of just in a more rough state of, hey, I've written this. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it kind of undoes some of the hard work we've already done. What do you think? And often they come back and they say, yeah, I like this, or I don't quite understand this, or I think this kind of twist or this plot point's a little bit thin, and yeah, and then we kind of just shape it as it goes, and then after it comes back from the proofer, it goes to my advanced reading team, and they help me to iron out any kind of final errors or issues in the book, and then very quickly, then that's usually just a week before it kind of goes out the door, so very quickly it'll come back from them and be uploaded and then released, really. So it's a very quick turnaround. I don't really give myself a whole lot of time to kind of go through that final sort of process. But when you're releasing kind of a book every 4 months on average, there's not a whole lot of time for anything other than just kind of writing, polishing as hard and quick as you can and going from there. But I'm hoping now after this trilogy we'll slow down to more kind of one every 6 months or something, just to really be able to step up the quality and the complexity and kind of really just take things to the next level with some luck.
So you made a point then about it being a trilogy, but they are trilogies within a series, which I found really interesting.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to carry out the story arc over that? Because you do, close threads and all of that kind of stuff. And then you're telling me you've got the trilogies. Each trilogy within the series has a set of covers, which I thought was a lovely idea.
Yeah, it kind of just, it felt kind of almost more natural to me, and they've always followed this thing where sort of the first book in the trilogy, so that would be Bearskin would be the first of the prequels, Angelmaker the first of the second, or the first of the main series, and then Death Chorus. They're very self-contained novels, and I always like to think of them as kind of, okay, we're going to do something different this time around, and kind of, what kind of tone and what kind of story do we want to tell? And I'll always kind of do the same thing where I'll tell a very self-contained story that kind of gives readers a sense of kind of what the next kind of few books are going to be about. And if they like that, then the second novel tends to be more directly linked to the third novel and will kind of, just tie into the first one. So Death Chorus, for example, was Jamie just comes to a new town. She's starting to rebuild her life. That's a very self-contained story of that. And you could read that as a standalone. And that would just be, you could read Angelmaker and then you could read Death Chorus and it would make perfect sense. But if you read kind of Rising Tide and then want to go into Old Blood, they kind of feel like a really interlocked kind of, pair of stories. They still have their own kind of resolutions and they're all, hopefully they're both satisfying in kind of isolation. But, you get a sense of real continuity, and the same with Quiet Wolf now that, Death Chorus tied everything up neatly and everybody was kind of, captured at the end. But when we get into, kind of Quiet Wolf, you feel like that's part one of kind of two, and that has an ending, but it just kind of really opens that door to sort of, build something bigger. And I always kind of envisioned that if I was writing one novel a year, I would write something that was in that sort of, 200,000 word range that would be a really big novel, like the kind of, like the Cormoran Strike novels that would be the entire story. But because of the kind of nature of the quick releases in self-publishing, we have the ability that kind of traditional authors don't, to kind of almost serialize things and say, okay, I'm going to tell you, this story here, which is part one of this story. And that's much more accepted. Whereas, if Ian Rankin did that and he only told you half a story and then you had to wait 12 months for the next one, you'd be a little bit kind of annoyed. So, I'm trying to not just kind of release books in quick succession, but trying to lean into that and trying to make that something that I can kind of use to my advantage, rather than just kind of telling shorter, punchy novels, saying, okay, I can, I can break this into kind of a break a bigger story down into 2 parts and kind of make it self-contained. And I think that a trilogy is the perfect vehicle for that, where you have the first book to set up the tone and the kind of the scene, and this is, you know, going to be Jamie's new partner, and this is going to be the beats and the feel of the story. And then kind of once you have the readers engaged, then you can kind of settle in and be like, okay, now you're into the sort of big sprawling kind of 2-parter that comes after. And you know, the reason sort of for trilogies is that after 3 stories, I feel ready to take Jamie somewhere else and do something else. And while I have, you know, a huge amount of respect for the authors who are kind of 10, 12 books deep into their kind of, you know, 1-by-1 series, you know, I want to do something new for myself as well, you know, and for readers. And, you know, and I hope that, you know, I hope that readers will want to go back and read Angel Maker in 5 or 10 years. But there's, for me, always this kind of sense of, you know, readers like to read something new. So if I'm in my 5th or my 6th trilogy by then, you can pick up that 6th trilogy and you can read that in isolation, and you can read any of the 3 books, like any of the trilogies in isolation in any order, and they'd all kind of make sense. So you don't have to say, oh, well, I want to read this, but because it's book 17 in a series, am I going to go all the way back and read book 1 to understand how we got here, you know? Yeah. So
yeah, it does make sense. Cal said, no, we like good answers, good wordy answers. That's good. I don't want yes or no answers. We're good. We like it when you go off on a tangent. It makes it more interesting, because it's not just getting an insight into the books, it's getting an insight into where you're coming from when you're writing the books and when you're researching and when you're getting to know your characters. So that's something I like to ask. Or I'd like to ask you. With Jamie, did you know kind of where your character arcs for each trilogy were going with her? Or did you kind of discover that along the way? I think we should talk a bit about Jamie, actually, because we haven't really, for anyone who hasn't read the books yet, she's a formidable, you'd want her on your side. You do not want her to be against you.
She's definitely relentless. Yiggy, stop that. Don't scratch the floor. He just likes to lie somewhere dark and it's kind of bright in here, so he's just over in the corner, so scratching. Hey. Yeah, she's. I wanted to start with, you know, a character that was kind of young and inexperienced, and, you know, instead of coming into the story as this kind of late 40s, early 50s kind of grizzled detective who'd already gone through divorce and already kind of faced off with a kind of serial killer nemesis and that kind of thing, which is a very familiar and very kind of, you know, interesting trope that still kind of underpins so many series. And you know, while there's definitely the kind of the sense of wanting to do that to kind of, you know, for every author to kind of make their own version of it, I was looking at it and I knew that I was coming into kind of crime, you know, inexperienced really in crime, and that there were many more experienced and better authors out there than me who had done that in their own way. And I just didn't really want to, you know, kind of create my own caricature of that. So I wanted to create a, you know, a detective who was a little bit younger, maybe kind of closer to my age, and kind of whose values and things kind of align with my own. So in the sense that, you know, my partner and I, we don't know if we want to have kids, and, you know, and we aren't married, and we've been together for a long time. And, you know, in that sense, I wanted to sort of mirror those things that I kind of knew the feelings of, you know, rather than kind of going to someone who'd been married and had kids and that kind of thing, and trying to, you know, pretend like I knew what that was like. You know, I chose to make Jamie a little bit more sort of in line with my own kind of.
I really like that, because a lot of people kind of go for the default of everyone has to want children, everyone has to think marriage is the norm. There's so many kind of misconceptions and preconceptions about people. So that is something that I like, because not everybody, I didn't think I ever wanted to get married and have children, but I have, and it's been the best thing for me.
Yeah.
But it was quite a surprise for me to actually realise that, you know, that was something I wanted. So I do like to read the differences in different characters.
and you know, and it is the norm for so many people. And there's, you know, and you know, later down the line, my partner and I have spoken about this. We've been together 10 years now. And you know, we've spoken about this, and we've talked. Yeah, you know, we do want to have children in a few years. We do want to get married and things, but you know, there are things we want to accomplish first. And Jamie was, you know, from kind of a broken marriage herself, and her parents broke up, and you know, there's lots of baggage got back there with her mother and her father, and you know, they had a very kind of tumultuous relationship, and that's her point of reference, you know, and she's kind of grown up in her father's image and wanted to be like her father and be like him, but was always really afraid to then, you know, have a family and kind of, you know, find somebody to be with, because she was afraid that she would do to them what kind of her father did to her mother, kind of thing. So for me, it was a case of wanting to have that baggage kind of with her, but to not make that a central focus of who she was. You know, like that was the thing that I always wanted to say was, you know, yeah, she's different, but I'm not really going to tell you why she's different. And, you know, these are kind of things we can glean over the next 10 or 20 or 30 books. And you can, you know, and I wanted to create Jamie as more of this kind of blank slate, as, you know, somebody who can be something, you know, other than kind of this very well-defined person of, yes, you know, they are straight and they've got married and they've got kids and they're a father and they're this and that, you know, and I've had lots of readers reach out to me and say, oh, you know, is Jamie gay? Is she straight? You know, is she going to get married? Is she like, you know, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know, you know, like, as, you know, she's, for me, you know, the romance element and the kind of sexuality elements of it were never really an important thing for me. It was always the case that she was driven by this kind of sense of wanting to be better than her father and to wanting to help people, and always having this kind of real sense of, you know, she bases her kind of self-worth on what kind of good she's doing, you know, because her vision of what was good and what was right growing up was so skewed, and you know, and she's really kind of just a bit broken inside, you know, and I think the Quiet Wolf explores that a bit more and kind of stuff, but not so much a label on it, but, you know, when, you know, she's had a lot of different partners who've kind of put up with her, you know, shit for long, you know, for a little while, but then have kind of got bored of it and drifted away, and she's let them disappear. But, you know, now she's got a partner who sees her and refuses to kind of let her get away with this kind of stuff unchecked, and that's been nice to earn that for her as well, and kind of, you know, come around to that in my own time, and now that I really know who she is, you know, to be able to kind of bring readers into it, into Jamie's kind of mind and into her sort of, you know, emotional state 7 or 8 books in, you know, once we all really know who she is, and I feel like that's, you know, that's something that readers have said to me, that it's been really rewarding to finally get this sense of who she is, you know, and that's kind of really nice, because I'm like, yeah, you know, that's how I feel, you know, like I'm only just discovering, you know, who she is, which sounds really pretentious and kind of, you know.
No, absolutely not. She's growing naturally, which is, you know, a perfectly natural thing. Is it Thorsten or Thorsten? How am I pronouncing his name?
It's I guess Torsen is kind of, that's how Google Translate pronounce it. But yeah, so yeah.
Well, this Mancunian will forget and butcher it anyway. But you've kind of hinted that he will be around for maybe a bit longer, possibly, than previous partners have been. Do you have kind of an idea of how long that might be? I'm not asking you to give it all away at the moment, because you in your devious mind, I dread to think what you're going to do.
I think that, you know, from the sort of the experience that Torsen has had as well, you know, like he landed in Kuriak, where, you know, Jamie escaped to, kind of, you know, like not long after she did, and he was also running away from, you know, some issues in his life, and, you know, and he's more of that kind of quintessential classic broken marriage sort of detective whose job took precedent and ruined his marriage, and, you know, he's more that kind of style, but, you know, he's kind of run away, and I think he's just, you know, left everything behind. He's found a friend in Jamie, like an unlikely friendship, and I think she's never had somebody that sees her in the way that he sees her. So I think that she's going to be reluctant to admit it, but she's going to be very kind of reluctant to lose him, and he's definitely going to kind of try and hold on to her. And I think that, you know, they're going to make more of an effort than previous partners have to kind of hold on to each other. So I'd like to see it kind of run as far as it can. Whether or not there's going to be kind of, you know, in my mind, there's some frictions that are going to develop just because I think they want different things out of life and maybe different things out of each other. But there's no way to tell whether or not that's going to be in the next book or in 5 books. And, you know, when they kind of almost live in my head, and they're kind of, you know, when I'm planning their conversations and things, which is the backbone of their kind of, you know, their dynamic, and the entire book really is, you know, is Jamie can't do these things alone anymore. And, you know, she's finally found somebody that is willing to kind of, you know, like do them with her, and I want that to persist. But, you know, moving Jamie to a small town, I don't know how much road there is there for her professionally. So somebody suggested maybe that they kind of set up a private investigation service together, or, you know, she's got some contacts in, you know, Interpol and the FBI. So, you know, who knows? I'd like to see them together for a longer period, but, you know, there's no reason they can't kind of have their paths diverge and then come back. And there's no reason that we have to go chronologically, that I can't, you know, after this series, maybe have them break up and then in the next trilogy pick up in 3 or 4 or 5 years when they come back together, you know. And like, there's no rules, you know, we can do whatever we want. So it's, but yeah, there's going to be plenty of fireworks in the next book between the two of them. So.
Devious mind, I knew it.
Yeah, well, you know, I
like that though. It's an exciting thing when you really don't know what an author's going to do, and you can't trust the author to do what you want them to do. That for me is the best thing. I love it, because there's nothing worse than kind of everything being predictable, which Quiet Wolf certainly was not.
Well, yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad about that. It's I mean, it's definitely tough writing in the kind of the indie market, where so many authors are putting out so many books to come up with something that feels fresh, and a story that doesn't feel, you know, like an homage to another story that you've read, or, you know, like coincidentally, when I released Rising Tide, another book was coming out like 2 weeks after it, also called The Rising Tide, and that was being edited by my then editor Rebecca Miller at the same time. So she was like, "This is kind of messing with my brain." And they had different kind of stuff, like different plots, but the same name and same title and this and that. And, you know, I know that there have been other stories as well that kind of my work has aired quite close to, that I didn't know about when I was writing them. And I know that other books have come out afterwards that have been kind of very close to what I've written, and probably those stories that I think are original that somebody else is kind of writing alongside, I probably, you know, wrote that thinking it was original, but it wasn't. And, you know, it's so hard to kind of come up with something that feels fresh for the reader. And that's always, you know, my hope to if I can't do something wholly original with the story or their idea, is to bring readers into it in a new way, and kind of give them a new kind of experience of something familiar, you know, which I think is what writing crime fiction is a lot about, because it's such a familiar genre, you know. So it's about kind of what is, you know, we know all the things that are going to be the same in the Jamie Johansson novels as other crime novels, but, you know, what things can I home in on that I can bring to it to kind of hopefully add some uniqueness, or, you know, a new spin on a very, very well kind of defined genre. So it's yeah.
There was actually a post in the group, and I won't say who shared the post because I've not asked her permission. It's just that we've naturally fallen into the conversation. And she's working on something at the moment, and she's seen that something else quite similar is either going to come out, or somebody's writing currently something similar. Do you avoid looking at other things that are out at the moment, or things that are coming out in the future, when you're plotting your novel for that reason? Or do you just kind of carry on as normal and know that if you write it, it's going to be different because it's coming from you?
I think it's so hard to do that, because that rabbit hole is so deep. You know, once you start digging down into, you know, what are other people writing around me, you know, it's very, very hard to find something original. I think you can back yourself into a creative corner there. I think it's always good to be aware of kind of where the contemporary sort of tone is at. Like there's a lot of so for example, 10, 15 years ago there was a lot of focus on kind of violence against women in crimes, where there was a very popular trope where you would have kind of a heroic male archetype and kind of a female victim who kind of suffered from kind of all manner of kind of abuses, and then some very prominent kind of female authors came through and were like, yo, this is not okay anymore. This can't be the kind of the baseline of it, and loads of authors rallied around it and started kind of thinking more outside the box and creating more kind of varied stories, and bringing women in as antagonists and males in as victims, and changing the kind of the sexual orientation and sexual preferences and things of characters, and bringing in more diversity. And that's really rewarding to see is kind of a push for change and that happening. So I think more than anything, instead of kind of looking at the specific plots of kind of things around you, I think the mindset I always try and embody is, how can I continue to try my best to push the genre in a direction that I feel is in line with its kind of evolution and that's kind of enhancing the genre. Because you go back and you read a great crime novel that was written 30, 40 years ago, feels very, very dated, very antiquated, very kind of probably pretty misogynistic and probably borderline racist and homophobic and all of these things that were kind of norms then that we are slowly eradicating. So I think that you can always reinvent the wheel when it comes to crime, but it's a case of doing it in a way that is, taking that genre and holding it to that slightly higher standard every time, and continuing to push that sort of, as I said, the progression, and being a progressive author, and saying like, hey, yeah, there's no reason I can't do my own spin on a cold case serial killer come back from the dead, or my own spin on a cult leader, or my own spin on, somebody dressed like a giant bird, and kind of using those very familiar tropes and very familiar plots from other novels, but kind of packaging it in a way that feels fresh because you are paying attention to the way that the genre is evolving. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's really, I think it's such a big thing that more people need to be discussing in the way that you are, because diversity is so important. We don't want a book full of just all white characters, all from the same village. In some stories, that's going to be perfectly natural because that would be how it actually was. But really, it's not realistic. It's not realistic to have lots of straight characters and nobody else.
No.
And like you were saying, I might write something about a married woman with kids because that's my experience. Your experience, well, you're not going down that road yet, or maybe never. That's so. It's what's realistic to one person will touch a lot of people. There's so many roads to go down, and there's so much richness to be had by broadening horizons.
It's the question that I always find most interesting is kind of where inclusion and diversity meets appropriation. And that's something that, that I know that a lot of authors are very wary of, because, we are living in a climate of cancel culture, where authors who overstep those kind of bounds and venture into appropriation they do receive a lot of backlash from, some of the, communities that they are kind of perhaps making an effort to represent. But the kind of, the issue, I think, with appropriation is where the author chooses to adopt almost a mindset that they can't know how it feels. Like I can include characters of different races and different kind of sexual preferences and things in my novels, but what I can't do is I can't write from the point of view of one of those persons and express how they feel or what their cultural experience is like. And I think that's where authors need to make an effort to really kind of talk very openly and very honestly about the differences between inclusion and, you know, appropriation, because yeah, it is frightening to kind of try and think about whether or not you want to include some of these more progressive elements in your stories, and things like, you know, the LGBTQ plus community, or whether you want to bring trans characters into your novels and those kinds of things. And I would encourage everybody who wants to do that thing to go out and engage with these communities and ask these questions very openly about, you know, what the kind of the best way to do it and the correct way to do it is, in a way that's, you know, sort of respectful and doesn't, you know, assume the point of view of and say, oh, well, you know, this is how I think, you know, people who've had this experience must be feeling, therefore I'm going to represent that and I'm going to be a voice for them. Because I think that's where the issue comes, is where, you know, people who haven't had those experiences very much try to relate those experiences. Like, that's where appropriation becomes an issue. So, you know, I'm writing Jamie as a kind of, you know, as you said, as somebody to whose experiences I can relate, and I'm more than happy to bring in, you know, a realistic kind of representation of, you know, the wide variety of people as are in the real world, you know, into my books. But I'm always very careful to ensure that I'm doing it in a way that is not kind of, you know, appropriating their experiences. And I'm so lucky to be in a position where I also run Grindstone, and, you know, we run a novel prize every year, and we do a lot of reading, a lot of judging of these novels that are coming in. And, you know, the special ones that I find that are kind of, that really leap out to me now, are the ones that are written, you know, by people who are able to accurately and authentically, you know, represent those kind of cultural experiences, because we lack them. Like, that's why there's such a big push for diversity now in kind of in publishing, because there is still a huge dominance of, you know, straight white people. And, you know, now there's so many kind of women authors coming to the forefront, and the scales are very quickly tipping back towards a kind of a much more balanced kind of male-female split. But there's still, you know, there's still kind of a very large dominance of kind of white and heterosexual authors, you know. So it's a real pleasure to be able to, you know, help to try and discover and bring some of these kind of, you know, authors whose work has been overlooked, perhaps, you know, in previous years, to the forefront, and to also be on the other side of it as an author and get the opportunity to kind of, you know, talk openly about this, about my kind of desire to be as inclusive as I can, and, you know, understand and try to, you know, open the conversation surrounding kind of appropriation as well, and really help to turn crime into a genre that's not just dominated by straight white people. And, you know, saying like, yeah, I would love to read more crime written by kind of, you know, people from, you know, from different experiences and things. And that's, you know, a really interesting kind of place to be now, I think. Sorry, that was a really...
No, it's great. It's the thing of understanding where somebody's coming from is fine, but let's not use somebody else's experience as a plot point and a twist.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, let's make real people. You know, I often will lie awake at 2 a.m. about a character that I've read who I've adored. I don't want to be waking up to think, oh my word, I hated that one. Why would they write that? Why? I don't want to be putting books down, which I'm not doing. You know, there's some really good stuff out there. I don't feel that you writing Jamie is an unnatural thing, because she is the real person. So it is. It's getting the balance right, and it's not taking the mickey out of things.
No.
Don't use them in your book.
Yeah.
Research and, you know, further your knowledge and educate yourself. It's all part and parcel, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, and I think you can take, you know, certain liberties, like, for example, you know, I'm talking about not writing from cultural experience while I've got a female character as my lead detective, but at no point do I ever stray into this conversation of trying to say, oh, well, you know, like, here's Jamie's point of view on the female experience of being, you know, like, you know, a female in a male-dominated field. You know, like, I don't have the experience or the right to go anywhere near that conversation. So what I, you know, I'm trying to tell is you know, a story using a character that I find interesting, and, And I find generally female leads in books more interesting than male leads for, you know, for a variety of reasons. And it's, you know, quite often I find that writing a female lead offers me the ability to use a larger emotional range, because I feel like the archetype of the male detective is that very kind of like stoic, like, oh, grumpy sort of, you know, like world weary kind of guy. And I feel that that's so played out and that's done by so many great authors that that has become such a stock character that I didn't want to create a character that had to fight against that. Whereas I feel like with, you know, Jamie, there's so much scope to explore a much blanker canvas, you know, because the kind of the landscape of female kind of led crime novels is not quite as full of these, you know, very, very well known, very, very well respected, very, very well written novels by, you know, great authors. So it's yeah, but it's, I think it's again, it's the idea of, okay, you know, how can we be, you know, inclusive, and how can we be progressive, but kind of be aware of what appropriation is and the dangers of it, you know.
And just like that, we're almost out of time.
Really? Wow. I'm so sorry. Most of it was just me talking.
No, this is what we like. I noticed that you didn't have Quiet Wolf, so I've just got that up on my phone so everyone knows what to look for. Because you've not got your copies yet, have you? Because you moved to somewhere really accessible.
Yeah, exactly. And everything's printed on the other side of the country, and it takes weeks and weeks to arrive here. So it's, yeah. It's,
so go on, give us a recap of the Jamie Johansson novels and where they can be bought from.
Okay, so I mean, Amazon's the place to go and get them. They're available on Kindle and paperback, and you can get them all on Kindle Unlimited as well, if that's what you subscribe to. They start in London with a prequel trilogy that kind of is optional reading, and then the mainline series starts with Angel Maker, which came out last year in January, and we just broke 5,000 reviews on, or ratings on it, actually, so that's a nice big...
Fantastic, congratulations.
Thanks so much. And yeah, there's 2 trilogies out, with Angel Maker being the first in the first trilogy, and Death Chorus, which I have a copy of, being the first in the second trilogy. So yeah, they do bring in kind of classic elements of Scandi noir and that sort of, you know, slow burn feel with lots of brooding sort of landscapes and, you know, miserable characters, but also, you know, plenty of punch and action a la Western kind of crime thriller. So yes, that's pretty much it. You know, start with any of them and hopefully enjoy. So
I'm going to see if I can find out who these comments are from. So let's have a quick look. Sorry if I've missed any questions. I've just got absorbed in chatting.
Oh, yeah,
so I do apologise. It's Donna that says they're all awesome, but Quiet Wolf is her favourite so far.
Well,
so that's always
very much.
Pat Barnes says, thank you for a very interesting chat between you. Thank you, Pat. And we just want to thank everyone who has taken part, and to you for coming and talking to me again.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And I'll see you next year, I suppose.
Absolutely. So the next book, book 6, just give us a quick, just before we go, due out in about August?
Yep, August 31st is the scheduled release date, and it's going to be the follow-up to Quiet Wolf. And yeah, it sees Jamie traveling to a distant town on the border between Sweden and Finland, one that experiences something known as polar night, which is where the sun goes down for a couple of months and doesn't come back up. And, you know, bad things happen at night. That's just the way of crime novels. So imagine, you know, remote Sweden in the ice, 3 months of night and lots of bad stuff happening. So that's, yeah.
Like I said, Devious Mind. Yeah. I look forward to reading it. Thanks so much, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you.